Okay, so B Corp certification is a certification given by a group called B Lab. And the certification means that you've passed B Lab's criteria for certification and are approved as a company that incorporates people, planet, and profit into your business structure. So you can see, companies that you're probably familiar with: Lemonade, Allbirds, Patagonia, Eileen Fisher. These are all companies that have received the B Corp certification. So B Corp companies, to get certified, you have to fill out an online assessment. You go through with B Corp, you have to change your legal standing to a benefit corporation, and then you also have to pay a fee to get certified. So a good way to, I think, help explain the certification is to look at these companies that have the certification. So Patagonia, I think we can all look at Patagonia and say that is a company that really incorporates people, planet, and profit equally into its business model. So certification looks at the strength of your business in 5 main areas: workers, governance, customers, environment, and community. So it's really a holistic look at your business focus on these 5 areas. So if you go to the next slide, thank you. So why get certified? Companies look to B Corp as a certification of their values and actions that they're taking to support the planet. So especially for companies that are growing, that don't have a sustainability team, but know that they're in that camp where they're thinking about planet, they're thinking about people, and they want to take action on sustainability. The certification process is a great way to both cement sustainability practices and then prove that you're taking action on them. So there are a ton of statistics about, how B Corps grow faster than non-B Corps. They have better customer retention rates. They perform better than the pandemic. There are a lot of benefits like that B Corps have that I think is another reason that companies get certified. So these are quotes from B Corps that just talk about the benefits that they've seen. So I think this first one, this is Tiffany Jana from TMI Consulting. My biggest surprise with the social capital B Corp community membership gave me with millennials. I no longer search for high potential staff. They now come to me. And this is conversations that I have with companies who are B Corps or want to be B Corps. They say that just that stamp provides a huge recruiting opportunity. I go to a lot of different, sustainability networking events or different things, and I would say 70 to 80% of people that are at those events say, I want to work at a B Corp. There are now career websites dedicated to just B Corps. So Nico says, what's the value proposition for a company choosing to get certified as a B Corp, but operates in a sector that traditionally doesn't value this type of certification? Read traditional agriculture. So I think some of the benefits are sort of industry agnostic. Like, everybody wants employees that are more engaged. Everybody wants customers that have higher rates of retention. Everybody wants to grow faster and have higher revenue, and B Corps are proven to do that. And then this is the other quote that I think also speaks to that nature. Tom Henning at Assurity Life Insurance: more than ever, people want to do business with people and organizations they trust. This fundamental truth speaks to the heart of why earning our B Corp status is important to us. So again, I guess with the sort of industry agnostic, the breadth of types of companies that are certified as B Corp is huge. There are, hundreds of different industries: service-based businesses, product-based businesses. So I think even if you're not sort of a traditional, fashion has a really high footprint. So in that way, it can be impressive or helpful to get that B Corp certification. But I think these other just sort of revenue, employee engagement reasons provide another. Does that answer your question, Nico? Okay. So if anybody wants to share their motivations or why they're thinking about it or what they've seen as reasons for certification, if you want to unmute yourself and talk about that. If not, that's okay. But I'm just curious what other people's perceptions of the certification are. I will say the other one that I've seen, founders, I think, have a personal value of sustainability or a personal value of wanting to improve the planet and leave it better than they found it. And often that can be the reason that they want to get certified. Okay, so let's get into how long does the process take? Okay, I will get to that in about 3 slides, Anne-Marie. Don't worry, we're gonna go there. We're gonna get into it. So the certification process, to get certified, you have to complete the B Corp impact assessment. So it's about 100 questions in these 5 areas that I talked about earlier: workers, environment, governance, community, and customers. And each of the questions are weighted and scored. And then in order to get B Corp certification, you have to get a score of 80 or above. Each question also asks for proof or documentation. So these are just some of the, this is a screenshot of the assessment. So what percentage is female management? What different supplier diversity policies do you have in place? What's the diversity of your ownership and leadership? And then those different categories are weighted. So a lot of the questions look like this, and then they give a range. So for example, female management, it would be, say 1 to 25%, 25% or higher, 50% or higher. And then you get higher points the more of your management is female. So once you complete the assessment, and usually you're above 80 points, you apply. So there's, a true application button that sends it to B Lab for review. B Lab reviews it and they send you some kind of follow-up verification questions and documentation. And that some of those things are supplier questions. It could be proof of employees. You have to show how many employees you have, sort of kind of background check type questions. And then you meet with B Lab. B Lab has analysts, and you meet with them for 90 minutes, and then you go through the application with them. So they'll have gone through it on their end, and they'll say, you've said, that 50% of your management is female. Let's talk about that. We need to see proof of this. You've said that you have supplier diversity programs and policies in place, and they have these 4 requirements. Let's talk about that. So it really is, once you're at that point, a lot of it is just a conversation, and you're sharing things and talking more about what types of things that you've done and showing proof of that. So if you go to the next slide, please, Norman. Okay, so this is completing the assessment. So this is sort of the meat and potatoes of what we're gonna talk about today, because I think this is where a lot of people have questions, and you can kind of get stuck a little bit. So the assessment is those 5 areas. Again, the workers, community, environment. And the first thing to keep in mind is that the assessment is based on your business type. So if you're a service-based business with 5 employees, your assessment is going to look very, very different than an agriculture company with 600 employees. So the assessment is tailored to your business type, and the questions that you answer, B Corp has developed to be specific to your industry. So if you are a company that makes products and manufacturing, there's going to be questions tailored to that. Whereas if you don't manufacture, you're not going to have questions related to that. So the assessment is an online platform. You can go through all of the questions in a row. You can pick and choose. It's very transparent in the sense that you can see how many each point is worth. You can kind of go around and do only workers for a little while. Then you can do governance. So when you're completing the assessment, you have flexibility in kind of jumping around and changing answers and testing things and adding different documentation. So each point is weighted. So depending on how high the standard is. So for example, total renewable energy use, if you have 0%, 50%, or 100%, that's going to be weighted differently, and you get more points the more renewable energy or the more energy efficiency. So B Corp says that you need a minimum of 80 points to be certified. However, I think a lot of companies I have seen get tripped up and will apply at 80. I recommend that you apply at least 85 points. B Corp has said that most companies drop at least 5 points. You know, they really get into the nitty-gritty of your policies and looking at each thing that you've shown proof of. And if you can't prove what it is or can't prove it to their sort of standard and what they have asked, then the points, you're going to drop down in points. And some of it is like, you know, 0.23 points and 0.5 points here. It is sort of smaller margins, but those things can tend to add up really quickly. So if you're at a place where you are, you know, you want to get through the whole thing and get certified and your UC minimum of 80 points, I recommend getting to at least 85 or 86 if you can, just because that gives you a little buffer. I liken it, this is a little too topical, but it's sort of like the Electoral College, where every one counts and every point counts, and you don't want to be in a point where you only have kind of 1.5 points of leeway. It feels much better to have some points to work with in that regard. So the next slide, please. Anne-Marie, here you go. The most common question I get, number one, how long will it take? The unfortunate answer is it depends, which I know is really helpful. So I'm going to try and give some context. So the timing of it is tricky, and it really includes two main things to think about. So the first thing to think about of timing and how long it's going to take is how much of what they're asking do you have documented? So do you have policies in place? Do you have an employee handbook? Do you have proof of energy efficiency? Do you have proof of your environmental practices? If you have proof, then it will be quicker because you won't have to write all those policies and do all those things and check that and create that. And then the second sort of timing question is what resources on your end do you have to allocate to this? And then the other, I guess, sort of obvious answer to how long it takes is how big is your business, how long you've been in business. But by resources to allocate to this, you know, is this something that you're trying to do while you're already working 70 hours a week? Or do you have the bandwidth right now to take, you know, 2 hours a week and do it? I would say the rough sort of average total time is between 30 and 40 hours. Some companies is much less, some is more. The other important thing to think about with timing is that you're not held to a standard. So when you start the assessment, you can take as long as you want to do it. It's not like you start it and you have 6 months. You start it, and if it takes you 9 months to do it because you can only do 20 minutes a week for that long, then you have that time from B Corp. So if you're worried about time, I definitely, or not worried, but if you're thinking about time and you're trying to figure out how to approach this, I recommend allocating, you know, an hour a week or 2 hours a week or 10 hours a month. Again, however that works best for your business. But this is not something that's going to be like an afternoon project, if that helps. The second part of the sort of broader timeline is that once you complete the assessment, B Corp has a timeline on their end. So that's sort of like the first part of what's basically kind of a 3-part certification process. So B Corp, I know right now, is working with a 5 to 8 week queue of applicants. So you could spend, you know, 40 hours over 4 months, get the application in, and you'll hear from B Corp and they'll say, great, we can get back to you to start the next stage in 2 months. And they're very upfront with that timeline and they will tell you about it. But again, it's sort of that, the assessment, and then you go to B Corp and B Corp says, okay, here's this verification template that you need to fill out. We have, you know, 4 weeks on our end before we can get to the next step. So those, once you get past the assessment and get in with B Corp, that's also something to consider. So the second kind of common question is, I don't do blank, is that okay? So I don't have a lot of environmental things, or I don't have, you know, a lot of supply things set up. The sort of short-ish answer is that's fine. I recommend that companies lean into what they're good at and lean into areas that you do have. So if you have really strong employee engagement and employee benefits, that will help you and you will get credit for that. So because the questions are weighted, and it definitely is by industry, and again, you can see how much each question is worth. You can look at a question that is, you know, 0.25 points or 3 points and say, okay, if this will get us 3 more points, maybe we should put emphasis into this. Whereas something that is 0.25 points, maybe that's not a good use of your time. And again, based on your industry, they're not gonna ask a service-based company a ton of environmental questions. That's not going to be weighted as heavily because that's not where you have the most impact. So the last question is, how much does it cost? B Lab has a list of pricing on its website. I will also share this in the chat. Pricing is based on revenue. So it's I think it starts at $1,000 annually. The fee that you pay if your revenue is under 150,000, and it goes up from there. So if you look on B Lab's website under, I think it's the certification page, if you go to the bottom, they have they have their whole price listing. So let's get to some questions. Will we be sent a copy of the recording? Yes, I will send a copy of the recording. I'd love to learn more about what the legal aspect of the certification implies. Resources and time. So legally, it depends on where you're located. The legal understanding of B Corp is that you modify your legal status to a benefit corporation. So there are, you know, legal costs associated with that. You know, you have to have a lawyer do some of that, and that really depends on your industry. Nico, where are you located? If you want to just type in the chat. Minneapolis. Okay. So if you go onto B Lab's website, there's a legal section and you can pick by state, and it will tell you by state what you should be doing. So when you say working in agriculture with founders that are conservative with resources and time. So again, I think that just depends on your own kind of cost benefit analysis. If they're interested in the environmental benefits or employee benefits, I don't know. Is that helpful? Does that? Okay, great. Can you recommend great resources that demonstrate? Yes, Anne Marie. So I'm going to share some resources at the end, and you'll be able to click on them and have them for your information. Does any, oh, what's the next? Okay, thank you. Does anybody have experience completing the assessment if they want to share about their experience, or have any questions about their own assessment or anything that they want to get answered specifically? You can unmute yourself or put it in the chat.
Hi, so I've got a question. Hi, everyone.
Okay. Hi.
So let's just say if the certification process is driven, say, by the HQ, which is US based, but it is a global organization. Does the certification then, is it relevant then for the global enterprise of that organization, or will it need to be done country by country? So, because, for example, employee benefits, say, in the US may differ widely to, say, to a smaller country in Asia, shall we say?
So I know that B Corp is working on, I think that it's live. There is now a multinational option.
Right.
And I can, I'll send that to you. Thanks, Nico. Thanks for coming. And because like Danone and all these sort of larger companies are now converting to that, so they are making that, there's an option for that now. And they'll be able to talk you through that. But yeah, I think they do it by like the number of employees that are in each location. And again, I think it's kind of weighted differently. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think so. Thank you. I think I need to take a look around their website a little closer, and maybe that will be clear.
Yeah, their website, I will say, no, and if you go to the next slide. Okay. So this is sort of tips and tricks and things to keep in mind. So on to the website, I will say that their B Lab's website is excellent. It's very clear. They have a significant FAQ section. Again, you can look at the different legal requirements by state, by country. The pricing is very transparent. So I think with the assessment, it's sort of unique. I like to think of it as being very transparent and yet private. So anybody can start the assessment and nobody has to know. It's between you and B Corp. So unless you want to tell everybody that you're taking it, you can, but you don't have to. But it's also transparent in that you're able to see all of the questions at once. You're able to see how much each question is worth and how much you improve by clicking on different answers. So if you're looking at something and say, if we created a policy around waste, how many points would that get us? So it's easy to play around when you're in the assessment and kind of look at what areas you want. And in the assessment, there's different, I guess it's almost like its own FAQ, but they have explanations about the question and why they ask it and sort of more specific information. So that's the first kind of part of the assessment. The second thing to keep in mind is that B Lab wants to help. I mean, they want people to get certified, they want to be of service, and they want to make it easy, and they're really interested in people's feedback. So I know that when you sign up for the assessment, you immediately get an email from them that says, please email this with any questions. They also do office hours where you can sign up for 30 minutes with a B Lab analyst. They have email support and there's different FAQs. So I would say that they're easy to get a hold of and communicate with. So definitely use that as you're in the assessment, as you're sort of like, oh, we don't really know like what to do or what this is. They want to help. So the other one, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but lean into, your company structure and type. So if your employee benefits and engagement are really strong, dig into that. Use that to get points. Use that to build more points. And then, use your team in the assessment process if that's helpful to you. You can also use it as a goal setting tool. Even if you don't want to get certified, there's a lot of value in just looking at the assessment from the view of, I'd like to make my company more sustainable. What steps can I take to do that? The assessment lays out really nicely, what policies they would recommend, what types of activities you should be doing to be and gets, to that sort of sustainable business, people, planet, profit place. And then the last thing to keep in mind is there is no time requirement for this. I think we said this earlier too. Once you start, you have as long as you want. Of course, that's good and bad because you're holding yourself to your own kind of timeline, and no one's pushing you except yourself. But once you start, you can kind of come and back to it and go at your own pace. And anybody can start the assessment. You don't have to pay to do it. You don't have to tell anybody that you're doing it in B Corp. So I think that there's a lot of value in, again, you can just create an account and go in and look at it and see what types of things they're asking and if you're even interested in that. Okay, first question, Christine. If you get bumped down to below 80 points during the process, does B Lab let you take time to implement, keep your place in line, or do you have to start over? You do not have to start over. You keep your place in line. They are a little stricter. Usually they'll say, like, depending on how far off you are, they'll say, okay, 4 weeks and do this. If you have applied at 85, you have documented proof and you have everything, usually you're not that much below 80, where it's just sort of tweaking some things or adding some policies. But once you're in through that kind of verification process and they've checked it, they're very interested in kind of pushing you and helping you get over the finish line. So you do get to keep in that. Does that answer, Christine? Okay. To Neil's question, at what stage is it too early for a company to apply? If you're a CPG brand and have 1 employee and are in your first year of business, is that too early? Do you need a specific amount of revenue or employees to be eligible? So to Neil, to answer your question, you don't. There's no sort of bottom revenue or employees. If you get certified and you're under a year in business, you get designated as what's called a pending B Corp. So it's still the same certification process and everything, just until you're a year in, you get this kind of pending moniker. But I mean, if you are a CPG brand and have 1 employee, I think that's fine. The benefit to doing it when you have lower revenue is that your fees are lower. Of course, your fees grow as your revenue grows. So I don't think there's any real downside to doing it when you're smaller. I find that a lot of, especially early stage companies, find it helpful to use B Corp as the kind of guiding factor into, okay, well, we do need an employee handbook and we do need a code of conduct and we do need these things that kind of put in place a solid business that is much easier to kind of use that and grow with, instead of, a larger company has to kind of lasso more policies and things around that. What's the process? Anne Marie says, Tennille, if that didn't answer your question, just put in the chat. What's the process for maintaining the cert year on year once you get it? So to maintain it, they check you every 3 years. And again, it's just kind of going through the assessment. They'll reach out and kind of check everything. So it's in your benefit to kind of keep monitoring it, but it is like it's a recertification every 3 years. And basically you're just saying, either if you have new things in place or you're keeping those same things in place, they just want to make sure that you're keeping those things in place. And then the other thing with recertification is B Corp does pick random companies to audit. So they will, you know, physically go to your business and check those kinds of things. And they'll let you know that they're doing that, but that's just kind of their other way of like checking things. And I think if you're above a certain size, the audit is included in your check part. Christine says, have you seen any companies legally become a benefit corp in their state and find that to be sufficient and not get the B Labs B Corp certification? I have talked to companies that just do the benefit designation. I think, again, it depends on your state. The person that I talked to was getting it in Delaware, and the requirement for that business was they just had to create a statement that said, our company creates public benefit by XYZ. So I think depending on what your goals are and what you're interested in, the kind of B Lab seal of approval from a consumer employee that facing provides a lot of value. And internally, it provides a lot of value because it forces you to create these more sustainable systems, put these policies in place, do all of these things to make your company more sustainable. Whereas legally, if you just want to become a benefit corporation, you just have to kind of show that statement. So if, for me, example, as a consumer, granted, obviously I'm in this space and I'm looking at this, but if someone said I'm a benefit corporation or I'm a B Corp, a benefit corporation, I would be a little bit more skeptical of. If they're a B Corp, I'm not skeptical in any way that they're sustainable, they're thinking about people, planet, profit, they have done all of that. Does that make sense? Yeah, so I think some states require a little bit more, but it's definitely not on the level of B Corp. So now I'm going to go to the next slide, please. So these are some resources here. I'll put them in the chat too. So this is like the legal requirements, certification, and then this is an article. This last one is a Vogue business article. It talks mostly about fashion companies, but it does talk about why companies are seeking this and benefits they've gotten from it. Anne Marie says, what's the difference between a benefit corp and a B certification? So benefit corps is a legal standing, sort of like a S corp or LLC corporation, that when you legally create your business, you can choose to do that, and then there's certain requirements that's usually just a statement. Whereas a B Corp certification, to get that B Corp thing, you are changing legally to a benefit corporation, but you're also undergoing all of this assessment and all of this process to get that B Corp designation. So just like, I mean, I think it's helpful to think about, you know, I am an LLC. No one would ever know that I'm an LLC unless I told them. Whereas if I'm a B Corp and you go on my website, I'm going to put front and center B Corp. I'm going to put it on products. I'm going to put it on this because it is, you know, it's a lot of time to do that and kind of different things. So next slide, please. Okay, so now, I mean, if anybody has any other questions, anybody wants to share their experience again of getting certified, or, you know, just experiences or questions, topics, anything related, go ahead and unmute yourself or put in the chat, or anything you want me to go back and talk about. I'm happy to do that. You're muted, Anne-Marie.
It's okay. I don't have any more questions. Thank you.
Okay, great. Anybody have any other questions?
Actually, Eliza, I do have one.
Okay.
In your experience of working with different clients to take them through this process, I mean,
Mhm.
you know, what are some of the most surprising things or the pitfalls that you have come across that, you know, that maybe organizations or stakeholders had not given the necessary amount of thought that that they should have? Is there anything that tripped companies up in your experience?
There's two things that I think of for this. The first is the level of documentation and what documentation means, I think trips a lot of companies up. If, you know, the fact that it is like, here's our environmental policy, you can't say, oh yeah, we're working on this, or we're going to get to that. It is, here's our completed policy. Employees have signed it. We've shared it with employees. And, you know, if they say, like, one of the questions, for example, is like employee engagement and how happy employees are at work. And you have to say, you know, 60 to 70%. And then, you know, if you give a percentage, B Corp will say, great, how did you come to that? And then you have to show the survey. So
Right.
I think that is really the main thing, that it is, they're really looking for proof and for answers. So again, because the process is so transparent, you know, if you want to get to 5 points, or, you know, the highest level of point for whatever question they're asking, then make your policy cover those things if you don't have a policy, or make that kind of adjust. So I think that's the first one. The other one, I think, again, some of this is just my bias from being in the space, but words or phrases or things that I just take for granted, like different diversity things or supplier or living wage. I think a lot of companies, it's just like, we've never heard these words before. We're sort of unsure about what this means. So, and I've heard that from B Lab too, has said that is part of their, that's why they have created all these different resources and sort of FAQs. And when you're going on the assessment, now you can click, and they have different guidelines about like how to create a supplier code of conduct and what is a living wage, and this dependent on your thing. And then the other one, I think it's just, again, figuring out how to allocate resources, because every company operates differently. Some people like to have one person that does the whole thing.
Yes.
And they just go to each person for information. Some people like to assign, you know, a team. Some people do, you know, this person works on workers, this person works on environment, this person does this. So, but I think that if a company is in a position where they're like, we know that, you know, these things matter to us, we want to be incorporating these things, we don't know how, B Corp is, I would say, far and above one of the best ways to do that, because it really does walk you through, and you have to show proof of those things. Does that?
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you. And another question is that in terms of, for, you know, an organization, you know, demonstrating that their commitment to sustainability, would you say that becoming, you know, certified with B Corp, that it, you know, that is a really good benchmark to showcase their commitment to sustainability? Or say, how does that compare with, say, you know, GRI reporting or other types of sustainability related reporting that's out there?
For B Corp, I think it's a much, if you're in like a B2C space, it's a great thing to be able to show customers.
Yes.
Whereas a customer is not going to read your GRI report. I love reading GRI reports. I know that I am in the minority. So I think a GRI from an investor standpoint, for that type of interaction, supplier even, and B Corp, I mean, at the end, your assessment is displayed on your website, your point is displayed on your website, all of that is visible. So you could still give that to an investor and say, here's where we are in each area. So I think, again, it depends on kind of what you're motivated by.
Yeah.
But yeah, from, I mean, an employee engagement standpoint. So again, I assume that, you know, a larger multinational is probably already doing GRI reporting and all of that, which if they're already doing that makes B Corp easier in some ways because you already have that documented.
Of course. Okay, great. That's been so helpful. Thank you.
Good, you're welcome. Any other questions or anything people want to share, talk about? Okay, I think, Ashton, can you tell us a bit about how you help people through the process? Sure. So I offer, thanks Anita, I'm glad. I offer sort of two ways of helping companies. There are some companies that just want sort of like a partner to help them do the whole process and want somebody to help them with policies and help, you know, assign different tasks or make sure that we're moving to the next stage and we're getting these things in place, and the person that kind of drives the whole process for however long it takes to get certified. So that's one option, kind of a longer term person to do that. And then the other option is a strategy session where we meet for 90 minutes. I go through your assessment before, and basically, you know, if you're anywhere between sort of 60 and 80 points, I'll go through your assessment and say, here's what you need to do to get more points. Here's the quickest way to get to more points. Here's the top 5 things you can do to get above, you know, 85 points. Here's templates for whatever policies you don't have. And then we talk about that for 90 minutes, and then you're sort of set free with that extra kind of boost, and then you do the rest of it yourself. Awesome, thanks Ashton. So yeah, so I just described that strategy session. If you know, are at a point where you are either in the middle of the assessment or want someone to help with that, that's what I do. I'm happy to have more conversations about that. You know, Naman and I have just, you know, try to kind of create a community around people that are excited about sustainable business and are thinking about business in this way. So we're always interested in what people want to talk about and getting feedback on that. So if there's a webinar on another topic you'd like to see, we're hoping to kind of do this either once a month or every other month based on topics that people are interested in. So I am going to put these things into the chat. Just our websites and LinkedIn's, you know, please email us, connect with us on LinkedIn. We want to talk to people that are interested in this. And we hope that, you know, if you want, you can connect with each other. If B Corp is something that you're thinking about in 6 months or 9 months or whatever, again, when you're at that point, please reach out. That's, you know, what we're here for, to help and talk about. I am going to send a follow-up email. So I'll send the resources that I did. We'll send the recording. We'll send the slides. And then, yeah, I mean, I think that's all. If anybody has any other questions or anything else that they want to ask or talk about, thank you very much for coming and for participating. It was great to have everybody here, and we really appreciate you taking the time. So thank you. We'll stay on until 1 p.m., but if not, have a great rest of the day. Thanks again for coming.
Thank you. It was a great session.
Thank
really
you. I'm
helpful.
So glad.
Really helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome. Oh, yeah, I forgot. Naman and I do a weekly sustainability series of videos too.
Oh, fantastic. And how does one engage with that?
On LinkedIn, if you connect with us on LinkedIn.
Great. I'm going to do that right now. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Have a good rest of the day, everybody.
Thank you.